Hello, I'm Harold Rivas, the host of the Resilient CISO LinkedIn Live series. And today I'm excited to join a conversation with David Cross. It's great to have you on as a CISO of Atlassian. I'd love to turn it over to you for a quick intro, a little background on yourself.
Thanks, Harold. I'm very excited to be here. Myself, I've been around for a few years, right? I'm a U.S. Navy veteran from many years ago. Been around the block with Microsoft, Google, Oracle, now Atlassian, all in the security space, right? I've also been pretty active in the startup community as well. So really kind of excited to kind of talk about this new era for us that's, approaching approaching, it's taking over, right? The world of AI and cybersecurity.
Absolutely. So let's round today's conversation on the role of AI in cyber resilience. I know AI. Look, CISO's listening. We've heard it now for a couple of years, but I think we all both certainly accept the fact that we're in a new era. Like things are really starting to change dramatically. It's no longer the hype. It's no longer a bunch of like smack AI on it and make it sound exciting. There are some real tangible impacts that we can feel. And as operators, we have a multitude of tools. We are all inundated with so much information. I think AI does actually provide some benefits on the signal to noise ratio, ways of evaluating whether or not I'm looking at just something that really should be tuned and maybe even get after the tuning so that we can start to improve that. I'd love to get your thoughts on how AI might help in that space.
Absolutely. I'd like to think about two things. Certainly, as you mentioned, right, there's an element of we have all this data, and historically, right, we looked at having machine learning and data science to try to analyze this data. What can we glean from this? What can we learn from this? And now that took a lot of work, right, and very fantastic work. But now we have AI that can do these things in seconds, right? Looking at the history, what's happened in the past, how it was remediated or not, right? And now we can do all these things in seconds, and then actually already have, the automation and things when something does occur that we know about, to act upon it, or also at the same time realize that, hey, this is noise, right? This is chatter, right? We don't have to act on this. At the same time, let's talk about noise and signals and operations, right? We think of that. We have all these playbooks and checklists and guidelines, right? Now, like within minutes, we can say, AI, what's missing from our playbook? What's missing from our checklist? What can we automate versus us look this up and what do we do? It's all automated now in seconds and minutes, right? And that changes the world on how we operate.
Yeah, David, great point. And I'm really encouraged to see that many of the frontier models are starting to have like these massive context windows, like a million token context window. It's a massive amount of information that an analyst is walking around and thinking about. So when we think about the tasks associated with doing the job, it's like, okay, what do I know? What has happened? How do I incorporate some history and some memory? All of those things are essential to be fed into the appropriate context to make the appropriate recommendation. As you said, this is now possible in a way that wasn't possible before. So very, very topical, very relevant is the fact that, some of the frontier models, concepts like mythos, are really changing the dynamic. They're changing how we need to think about vulnerability identification, not only within our own shops, but how others, the ecosystem of providers and technologies that run a modern enterprise, are going to have issues discovered and patches issued and patch cycles compressed because attackers also have access to develop exploits at an alarming rate. I'm curious, let's talk a little bit about the compressions, right? So it's both this two-sided, double-sided sword that we're dealing with. It's got these tremendous benefits, but it's also making sure that we have to run much faster because it's compressing timelines. Love to get your thoughts.
Well, I think there's a couple elements here. One is, let's say that of with this new model, and let's assume the attackers already have the model, even though it's restricted to the day, right? And so even then, if you look at most environments which are internet facing, is everything externally facing? Is everything externally exposed, right? So I'll do a simple example. Name your favorite operating system, right? It's like, oh, here's a 0 day, on the local system. Well, what attacker has access to the local system, right? And so, yes, it may be a 0 day. Maybe there's 100 0 days that are all local, right? But how can attacker actually use those? So I think we really have to look at an element is what is the true threat here, right? Versus what is actually possible in the number of bugs that are found. So I think that's one of the interesting data points that's going to be coming out in the near future that we need to observe and watch.
Yeah, absolutely. The way we triage vulnerabilities, the way we think about which ones are most impactful, as you said, right? So I'm going to risk rank an RCE much higher than local privilege escalation, as you just cited, right? Because, you know, human resources are finite, right? And we can only apply so many humans to the problem, which actually is a perfect segue for my next discussion point, what I wanted to cover with you, which is I certainly believe that in a world confronted with machine level speed, right, machine speed attack, that I have no choice but to start to find those low value human in the loop areas and try to figure out where do I start to reduce that and maybe hand over some decision authority to an AI, right, a platform to start to make more and more automated responses. And I'm curious, right, in a world where AI is both advisor or can act, how are you thinking about those opportunities, and where do you think you might lean more heavily into maybe moving beyond advise, right, to actual action?
I certainly think that it's something that companies will develop their algorithm, their risk tolerance or their appetite, right? And maybe the way you describe it is the track record, right, of these agents and how they operate, and that track record and saying, how much do I trust them? But you said advisor, I think of a good analogy is then what about people that get a wealth advisor, right, or a financial advisor for the first time? Do they immediately say, I turn over everything and I don't pay one iota of attention to it whatsoever? Of course not, right? You kind of get the track record, get comfortable, and then eventually, as you get that track record and results, right, you step away and say, I'm not going to, I don't have to approve every transaction, every choice. And I think the same thing's going to occur with AI and our agents.
That's a great point, and that's a great way to frame it, right? At the end of the day, there are going to be certain decisions that we can easily hand over and say that's a low risk decision. I know the track record, the platform is consistently delivering that result, and that's something I can move away from and not so much think about. Uh, I know.
I said give you a good example. And so I think one example here, just at Atlassian, right? We have, the developer, we got Jira and Confluence and Bitbucket and our framework. So this is where one of the things that we do is we look at our teamwork graph. And so that's something that, hey, what's been performed? What's been the history? What do we all know about this? And saying, hey, what is that risk? And so then it helps us to easily make decisions, right? And then, hey, how do we tune that model accordingly, right? And I think that's how people need to look at is that greater graph, right, of their environment, and then using all that data. And that's the advantage of AI. So if you use all that data, you can actually make the best decisions versus it just being wow, it's guessing and it may be a hallucination.
Right.
So I think you can avoid that quite easily.
Yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, you don't want to have it act in some highly privileged way, in a way that can be super disruptive, especially if you don't have the track record, which is, I think, another perfect segue to a discussion point I'd love to have around, and this is something that, in the halls of like the RSA conference and others, there were discussions around how am I going to track when I do start to hand more and more? And it may not be in the realm of the CISO. It might be your chief marketing officer who has an agent, or your customer success leader who has an agent who is acting on behalf of an account or something. But how do you track that? These are different identities. This is NHI, and this creates a very different forensic investigation path, a different way of governing and managing identities in an enterprise. And they're starting to accelerate, right? At some point, we're likely to end up with far more non-human identities than actual humans that work for the enterprise, if not already. Curious, how are you thinking about this problem in this space in relation to AI?
Yeah, great topic, right? It's just most recently just had a local dinner with some other CISOs, and the topic of exactly this came up. And really, kind of the community, we kind of look at it is that there's really 5 things you need to do. First and foremost, you need to decide on your framework, right? Is how you're going to operate. The second is you need to have an inventory, right, of all these agents, and that's going to be a dynamic inventory. It's going to change, vibe coding, other things. That. The third is, as you're mentioning, it's the identity and access management. They're going to be non-human identities, and then what entitlements and privileges, just in time, do you want to have with them? And then fourth, right, is the logging. Because in the end, right, if you have the logging, you can find out if something goes wrong, you know where it went wrong or how it was done. Or you can alert on it, or you can do forensics and all those type of things. And then last but not least, I wish I had a good name for it, but it's kind of like you almost need the agent to monitor the agents, right? Who will watch the watchers, right? And especially you're seeing with the coding agents and others is, this is where, you need various technologies like, Manifold or Gnostic and Striker and all them. Say, look at it so we can know, because the coding agent, it can go wild very dangerously and have a big blast radius. So if you have that, then you can know how to act first, before it goes wrong too quickly.
Yeah, great points all around. I think the reality of a well-architected agent is something that isn't going to happen right out of the gate. There is a almost prescriptive nature to this that I find as maybe a bonus question here, right? An opportunity for us to think about the role of the CISO as not only someone who's putting the right guardrails and gatekeeping to some extent, but really the role of the CISO as enabler of these kinds of capabilities in the enterprise. Because it's very easy to see tremendous amount of demand coming in from all over the business, from every area of the business that says, I have this amazing use case, I want to do this. Maybe they've already gone out and implemented a set of solutions under the guise of, maybe a SaaS model that they're implementing that has all these embedded AI components. But between vibe coding and others, we're going to see all these little green shoots of new agents coming into an enterprise. And I do think that as CISOs, we have an opportunity to try to appropriately steer, guide, encourage. We want to encourage the use of these things, but we want to do so in a way that we're building the awareness. Why do you need to do it this way? It's not complexity for the sake of complexity. It's so that when something goes wrong, Mr. Marketer or Mr. Head of HR, we or he or she, we have an opportunity to go and work with them to say, hey, look, let's make sure we can bring this back on track. Curious about what you're seeing at Atlassian and beyond with peers in terms of thinking about who are we in this space?
Yeah, 2 parts, right? First and foremost, for a company like ours, we're a development company, we're a high-tech company, right? So for us, everyone thinking like, yes, I'm going to use the pipeline, the dev model, the CI/CD pipeline, those type of things. I'm not going to just go bypass that, right? That's not the culture of our company. But if you think about all the other verticals, healthcare, manufacturing, retail, right? Do they have a dev culture? No. Okay. So how do you, approach this? Well, everything is me AI native code development, right? And vibe coding. So that's still needs a software development lifecycle, security development lifecycle, right? So just do the same thing. That's how you think about it. So, hey, if they're going to have AI assisted code development, let's have AI assisted software development lifecycle, right? So let's do the thing. Let's build the agents to help the agents, right? And that's what it's all about. Let's operate the same way, the same speed. So they don't have to worry about, okay, I can vibe code and have it generate all my code. And this agent sits with you and it's going to find the vulnerabilities, the privacy, compliance and things and do that too. So you don't have to, after the facts, I made a mistake. So do it all together. Do it in the same way.
Excellent. Absolutely spot on. I think that we are in some very exciting times that require us to lock in, Think about what can go wrong. Think about how we're going to help these enterprises navigate these challenges in ways that are faster, more impactful than they have ever been. I do think that AI has a critical role to play in cyber resilience in the
Mhm.
future. So, David, I want to thank you again. Awesome conversation. Great to have you on. Look forward to having you on again. Thank you.
Thanks, Harold. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to the next one.